Straight Shift with The Car Chick, the podcast that's all about cars, buying, selling, fixing, and driving. And sometimes pretty fast if you're the car chick. Now, here's he is.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Straight Shift. I had a client call me last week and ask if I knew of any really good limousine companies because they wanted to book something for New Year's Eve. And it was a really interesting question. I realized while I know a lot of really great companies simply because I do a lot of business networking, I don't actually know jack about limousines. I literally thought back to my whole life, and I have never once actively booked a limousine. I've ridden limousines, mind you, but mostly as airport transportation, mostly by accident. I booked a town car and they didn't have any more, so they just picked me up in a limo, and I thought, woo, aren't I special? But I've never actually booked one. Been married twice, never booked a limo for a wedding, didn't even have one for prom back in high school a million years ago. So I realized this was a serious gap in my knowledge base. Even though I don't buy limousines and it's not something that I really need to know, it's still a car, and it's a car thing that I didn't know a lot about. So when I don't know something, I dive deep down the rabbit hole of research and I consult with other experts in the industry. So today I thought, since we're heading into New Year's and people are also starting to plan events for the spring, weddings, proms, birthday parties, whatever, this might be a great time to talk all about limos. So I tapped my buddy Jonce Gibson of Bayside Limousines up in Washington, D.C., and so we're going to talk limos today on The Straight Shift. Hey, Jonce, welcome to The Straight Shift. Thank you so much for being here to educate both me and the audience all about limousines.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's been a long time that we've been a part of this industry. So a lot has changed, a lot has been different. Background on us, we've been doing it 30 years.
I know you have a background. You've loved cars your whole life like I have. We're both total car nerds. And I know that we share some background in racing, but how did you specifically get into the limo business 30 years ago?
So I actually, I was, like you said, car nerd, loved cars, raced them when I was a kid, both on and off the track and so on and so forth. So in order to support my habit, I had to work at a gas station, right? So, I wanted to make sure I got parts at the right cost, and I had to learn how to work on them. Right? So later on, I bought that gas station when I was in my early 20s, and the guy that I bought it from had a couple limos, and it just got the bug, and we said, well, yeah, it can't be that hard.
Famous last words, right?
So he took his limos and went away. So we actually bought a company that was already existing that was somewhat floundering. And we were fortunate to find that and have a little bit of kind of out of the frying pan and into the fire, so to speak. And, within a couple of years, we sort of got a handle on it. And really our biggest break was about 2 years in. We had a general manager at the time, and one of the local concert venues, he said, hey, man, why don't we call them and see if they need a limo company? I'm like, there's no way, man. They've got limo company. Well, we struck gold. We hit them right at the time. They had just fired their 20-year company, local concert venue. And they said, look, we're going to give your information to some of our bands that are coming in this summer. So the first band and that gave us an opportunity, that gave us a crack, I get a call from a guy named Tony Smith. Tony says, well, look, man, we need you guys for this venue and maybe 4 or 5 other ones. Do you have any problem with driving Metallica around? I'm like,
I love Metallica. I'm such an 80s heavy metal nerd. You know how old I am, when I talk about, the music from my high school years. That is so cool.
So it's like, a bunch of idiots out of the back of a gas station, all of a sudden we're driving the biggest band in the world. I mean, we had police escorts and and it was kind of surreal, right?
That's really, really cool. And, just good business lesson here for you entrepreneurs out there. You just never know what will lead to an incredible opportunity. So that's awesome. I'd like to get a little nerdy before we kind of get into a little more of the limo experience because, car nerd here. I want to talk about how limos are made because, of course, when I started going down this rabbit hole, I thought, wonder how they actually make these things. And the car companies themselves, I understand, don't actually make the limos, although I think Mercedes and some of the like Rolls-Royce may make their own. But for the most part, they just make the normal car. And then these third-party conversion companies buy them, whack them in half, so to speak, and then do that conversion very much like with mobility vehicles. So what types of vehicles, we think of the Cadillacs and the Lincolns, but I know there's SUVs. Like, what all can be limoified? We're gonna invent a new word today, limoified.
For the most part, you're absolutely right. They take a vehicle and they basically cut it straight in half and they stretch it out, different lengths. In our industry, you'll hear terms like 60, 120, 180, 220, 240. What that means is that's how long they're adding to that vehicle. So 120 is 10 feet in the middle. So you're taking that very same vehicle, adding 10 feet to it. So, as I said, in the past 3 decades, everything sort of changes. Again, there was a time when we first started where, it was a race to get the longest stretch imaginable, right? So that was who won, right? Who had the craziest, most outlandish, and we played that game for a while too. And then it, kind of evolved into the stretch SUVs. Same thing. Okay, well, I need this monster thing, but that's not enough. I need crazy doors that fly up. I need lights outside. Part of that market is not just the experience of riding it. It's they want to see the reactions of the people that are watching them get out of this thing.
But that sounds really expensive because when you stretch a vehicle, you're not actually stretching it. They're adding however many feet of metal. You've got rocker panels. You've got to build the floor pans.
Yep.
I learned a lot of this when I was doing the TV show Rust Rescue, and we were just restoring classic cars. We didn't stretch any of them, but everything was rusted out. And when you add all that feet, you're not just adding metal. You have to extend the exhaust system. You have to extend the brake lines, fuel lines, all the wiring harnesses, adding more air conditioning, adding, more heating. There's just adding extra batteries. So right. I would imagine that gets super expensive. Like, seriously, what's the price range for a new limousine these days?
Well, it's these days it's very expensive. Ever since, COVID, everything has gone, through the roof. Back in the olden days, we could be sub 200,000 for certain vehicles. And that was the crazy ones. Wow. And the stuff we had stuff with red paint, black and silver, and Lambo doors, and and all this stuff. But here's the thing: the crazier it is, the more breaks. So the more maintenance you have on it. So all those crazy doors, they break. They break. So, but to answer your question, equipment has doubled since COVID. So stuff we used to buy for $100,000 is now approaching $200,000.
Wow.
So, you're still, Sprinters are, $180,000, $200,000. Stretch limo right now is probably in the $145,000, $150,000 range still. Because you got to remember the base units now are higher as well. You're
right. I do buy Sprinter vans and all the basic vehicles. And actually last week's podcast was talking about what happened to all the cheap cars and the fact that since 2019, car prices have risen 30%, outpacing inflation. And that's true of the luxury vehicles and the commercial vehicles. So sure, and then all the parts that you guys need to then limoify them have also gone up. So I'm not surprised to hear that you're pushing $200,000, $300,000 for these vehicles.
So it brings me back to the point of why don't we have a lot of the crazy vehicles anymore? Because at least in our market, it doesn't support it.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, we had to go to more, at least in the last 5 years, to more versatile units that can, maybe go on a party, but also go on a corporate event. There's some of those wild and crazy units, you can't survive off 3 or 4 rentals a month on that type of number. So that's why, at least from our perspective up here in the DMV, we don't have as many of those options anymore because that unit has to do double duty. If it's a party style, then we have to be able to turn the lights off so that, the corporate people can utilize it as well.
Is it true that you have a 1957 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud in your fleet?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
People, if you've never seen that, and I'll put the link to the Bayside Limo website in the description of the podcast, go out there and look at the vehicles in his fleet. you have to see the Rolls Royce. It's one of the most beautiful vehicles ever made, and it's great because you give a little bit of a history about it. So it's not just if you want a stretch limo or you want a party bus, but if you want something vintage to make you feel like the Queen of England for your wedding, man, that's what I would want. It's just so beautiful. What type of events do you guys do? You were talking about corporate events versus parties, but what do people actually rent limos for, other than going to the airport?
Yeah, I mean, so again, most of the services have evolved where the actual stretch limo component is a smaller portion of our vehicles now. So, like, for example, for weddings, we're seeing more of what we call necessary transportation. Guests and people that are, they want to keep people off the road from drinking and driving and what have you. So what you're finding now is that people are spending more on, as I mentioned, some more of your basic kind of vehicles. And the Sprinters fit that category too. So again, coming back out of COVID, we used to see, we have vehicles that'll sit, 30, 40 people. But what we're seeing now is that those groups are diminishing, right? So, when's the last time you had 30 or 40 people together? Not very often. We're seeing more of the 10 to 12 range people. So again, we've had to evolve from these big monstrosities back down to smaller groups. But to answer your question about events, right now we're in the middle of the winter. So we're doing the winter light tours. So, it's really cool. You go around, you see all the lights and get some eggnog or whatever else you want to put in here.
That's really cool. We do that in our neighborhood in my Mini Cooper, but I can't, drink while I'm doing that. It'd be much nicer if somebody else were driving so I could have a beverage and look at the lights.
So, a lot of folks are doing those kind of things just to celebrate, just to be with family and do something different and create a memory. And that's kind of what our business is creating that experience. You and I talked about that earlier. It's great to have a fancy car, but, it's really about, what, am I going to be able to remember this for the next, decade or two?
Well, that leads to a good point. When someone is looking to book one of these vehicles for some sort of event, whether it is for a wedding and they need to transport guests around, or if they've got family coming in for the holidays and they want to do something fun where everybody can be together and have a shared experience, maybe have some adult beverages, while still staying safe, how do you choose the right limo service?
Yeah, you have to do your due diligence, of course. So there's a number of factors that are happening in our industry right now. And I would encourage everybody to deal with a real company. And what I mean by a real company is somebody that actually owns their equipment. Right now in our industry, there's a plethora of what we call brokers. A broker doesn't really own any equipment. What they're doing is services. It works great with car rentals and airlines. It doesn't necessarily lend itself very well to a service type business. So number one, make sure you're dealing with a real company. How do you know you're dealing with a real company? The best thing you can do is say, hey, where's your shop? Can I come look? If they're not going to let you look at their equipment, they're probably not a real company. Or if they are a real company, they don't want you to see the car until it's too late. So just one question, hey, can I come look? And whether you plan on doing it or not, just pay attention to that response. If they're reluctant to let you see, then stay away from them.
It's just asking them, do you own your own vehicles? Are they going to be honest with you or not? But if you ask, hey, look at them, that's a little more of a pointed question.
Pay attention to how you're getting treated on the phone. Because all of it is part of the service, right? The before, during, and after. Are they responsive to your emails? Are they responsive to your calls? Do they, are they willing to help, or do they have an attitude?
When you're ordering a limo, you do want to have that higher level of experience. You're paying a lot more.
Right. And so a lot of people, the only thing that they judge us on is price, right? So not every vehicle's the same. There are a lot of different coach builders, a lot of different levels of these things being nice or not nice, or, and you can even ask somebody, hey, what age is it? It might be 1 year old. It still might be beat up. So all of the factors that go in, are they responsive? Are they treating you nice on the phone? Well, if they're not treating you nice on the phone, guess what? You're probably not going to get treated nice on the day of the event.
And they're likely not to communicate well with you. And, I can think of nothing more stressful than, a bride planning her wedding and not feeling confident that the limo is going to show up and that her family and her guests are going to get to where they need to go, or she's going to get to where she needs to go. It's the most stressful day of, most people's lives. And just basic communication seems to be something that fails a lot of companies.
I don't think it's just in our industry. I think it's in a lot of industries. The Amazon effect where, people want to point and click. We try to look for pain points, along the process. Somebody might have rented, or booked this 6 months ago for their wedding, right? And maybe we had a conversation with them 2 weeks prior, but during that 2 weeks, all of a sudden that anxiety starts building. Are these people show up? As you said, are they going to be here? Even if we talk to them the week of, by the wedding day, that anxiety's going way up. Where are they at? Where are they at? And so, the lower we bring the anxiety, the higher the satisfaction comes. And look at reviews.
So your Google reviews, you can't always trust Amazon reviews, but Google reviews of companies, Google doesn't let you edit them, correct them, or even take them down. So, if you get a bad Google review, it's out there, I think, forever.
Oh, yeah. And, and then nobody's perfect. But if you make a mistake, you own it, you fix it, you do whatever you can do, you overcompensate, and that's what really everybody in every business should be doing.
Exactly. That is just good business. Now, what can people do when they are planning to rent one of these vehicles? They're planning that experience. What do they need to know to help them plan so that they do get the most out of that experience?
Well, I think the first thing is to figure out how many people you have, right? Because
that count's always good to know.
But we get the call all the time. Hey, we might have 10 to 30 people. Well, that's a big range, right? So
those are different vehicles.
Right. Yeah. So knowing that you're going to have an attrition rate as well. And then that's the other good point too. Whatever size vehicle that you buy or that you rent, if it's a stretch limo or a Sprinter or one of those kind of units, understand that it's going to seat comfortably 2 or 3 people less. So, for example, a 10-passenger limo that's been around for 30 years, 7 or 8 people for comfort. So when they build a limo, they list the average person at 5'5", 135 pounds.
They must be in cahoots with the airlines then.
All right. That's so number one, you want to make sure you have enough room, and then figure out do I really want all the bells and whistles? Do I want super crazy, wonderful, or am I cool with just basic transportation? So, for example, if let's just say you're going to a winery, most of your time for that is going to be spent outside of the vehicle. So instead of the, super high-end interior, there might be a more affordable solution for something that's a little bit more basic, that's still clean, still keeps you off the road, and so on and so forth. So yeah, having an idea of what you want to do is important, but allow folks that do this for a living to say, yeah, this works. No, this doesn't work. If you don't have a company that's not helping you with the planning, then that's part of it. We do this every day. So for us, we can share with you, Leanne, yeah, this is going to work, or no, I think it's a little aggressive, and again, we talk people out of some itineraries and go, well, what about this way or what about that way? So, for example, when we do guest transportation for weddings, we have a lot of brides and grooms that want to run their transportation right up to that ceremony time. So the problem is if there's any chink in the armor, anything that happens, we're running over that ceremony time, and now you've got stress and chaos, and so. Right. So we go through a lot, at least, us and there are other companies that do the same thing, go through a lot of homework to make sure that we're giving the right advice so that your event is successful. It's great to have a wonderful vehicle, wonderful person, but if your plan doesn't work, all that stuff kind of goes out the window.
Right. And you guys, because you do it all the time, you see all the things that can go wrong. So you might as well learn from the experts and take that advice. Because that helps lower your stress level, and you'll end up with a much, much better experience.
But yeah, you don't want to miss your plane, you don't want to miss your concert, you don't want to miss your wedding. We're a turtle, so it takes us longer.
Because they don't modify the engine of the vehicle, so now this poor engine has to pull so much more weight. Modify the suspension, make it comfortable. And you guys can't just go everywhere, especially if you're in a stretch. You want to talk about something that has a terrible turning radius. You got to plan your routes a little bit better. You're not going to go in places that my Mini's going. So,
that's, and I'm sure in your town, just like ours, there's places that we can't get into. Annapolis is famous for that. So tight quarters, and we want to be safe. I mean, that's the other side of that coin is the crazier the car, the more modified it is. I mean, they're not, the one downside is they're not really modifying the brake system. So, you want to make sure that that's something that's you take into consideration. That's why, again, a lot of people are migrating away from some of the more traditional stretches into some of the Mercedes Sprinters and things like that, because it's a unit that's made for that type of application, where we were taking something that wasn't made to do what it was doing and doing it anyway.
That's kind of what humans do, right? I mean, we did the same thing in the race car world. But I would hope that they would at least upgrade the brakes, just a tiny bit. But, I understand that in 2021, when they passed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, part of that giant bill was to require limousine companies that modify them and actually limoify these vehicles to meet at least some of the safety regulations that regular vehicles need to make. Because, when you, like we said, when you stretch something another, 10, 12, 15 feet, you're adding all that metal. What you're losing is a lot of the structural integrity. All of a sudden, all of your structural pillars are in the very front and the very back, but there's nothing in the middle. The one is for a limo to get T-boned. Now that is in place, and these vehicles do have to be built to some better safety standards, which, protects your customers, it protects the people riding in it, protects your drivers, and it protects your company from a liability standpoint.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the biggest safety component that companies have is their chauffeurs.
It's always the nut behind the wheel is the most important safety feature in any vehicle. I preach that all the time.
I mean, yeah, it's something that, again, as I mentioned, we're the turtle, right? So we take that approach. So when somebody gets in the bag and they go, hey, man, can you hurry up? Absolutely. And we still drive the speed limit, So that's number one. Number two, I will say that regulations existed before the 2021. I mean,
oh, good.
The amount of regulations that we have to abide by is substantial, both from a vehicle standpoint and from a licensing standpoint, not only for the company, for the drivers. Now, at least that's in the DMV. I don't know what it's like in some of the other areas. But once you get into more of the CDL, now you've got federal requirements that are I have a book that's about this thick that I've read 3 times and I still don't really understand it. So again, having a good coach builder, having great maintenance programs is important, making sure that, you're out there looking, no matter what you do. I mean, you're in the car business. You could check it out right now and then you get on the road and something happens.
And something happens.
But as far as regulations, there's a tremendous amount of regulations. And one of the biggest things that's a hot button now, and rightfully so, is the hours of service. So,
just like for truckers.
Well, it's the same for us. So we're commercial vehicles. So yeah, I mean, back in the old and Wild West days, you might have a car go out for, 15 hours or so, but that's just, you can do that now, but you have to have more than one chauffeur. So it's very important to make sure that, a lot of these regulations, I think it's a good thing to keep people safe. I think regulations are good. Over-regulation is not, but, meanwhile, there are companies out there that aren't regulated at all.
Right. Yeah. Your Ubers and your Lyfts. And that's one reason that when I travel to the airport, I generally will book a car service simply because, I feel safer both with, I know that person's driving record, what they have to maintain in order to maintain their license. Some random person shows up at my house in their personal vehicle. I don't know how well that car has been maintained. I have no idea what their driving record looks like. I just personally feel, and especially as a woman, I feel a little bit safer getting into a vehicle where I at least know there are some regulations and protections around that versus it just being, something of a free-for-all.
Well, yeah, and that's something that I don't think it's going to go away. Uber and Lyft is not going to go away. Customers love it. It's affordable. It's easy. It's convenient. But they have sidestepped and circumvented every rule and regulation to the transportation industry. So I don't want to be too negative on that because it does serve a purpose, but it would be nice to have a level playing field with those kind of, because we used to have town cars and SUVs. I mean, we still have a few of them, but not like we used to. People hit 3 buttons and the car shows up. But yeah, the fact that you don't know who's coming in to get you, you don't know if they're vetted. I mean, all of our folks, and I'm sure around the country, have to be FBI background. So you're not going to, that's important. our insurance company twice a year pulls MVRs. So if our folks have suspensions or if they have points, they're disqualified. But
Right.
that doesn't exist in that realm. And
Right.
I know it's cheap. I know it's easy, but yeah, you're taking a big risk. You're taking a big risk.
And again, there's a place for everything. And I certainly have, taken my share of Ubers when I just need to go here, need to go there. But when it's something important and I have luggage, my mother is 79 and she has a lot of mobility issues. And so when we travel together, it needs to be a vehicle I know she can get in and out of. So I want to be able to talk to someone to say, okay, I need to know exactly what vehicle is going to show up to know she can get in and out of it because she cannot get into SUVs. So, I want that specificity that I know that, we're all going to fit in the vehicle. She can get into it. It's going to fit all of our luggage because we can't go anywhere without taking a ton of junk with us. And I know that the driver has had to pass tests, that they're being monitored and the vehicle is being maintained. And it's just overall safer for when it matters. If I just need to go from this place to that place, for a few minutes, I'm not going to worry about it. But, I'm not worried about the customer experience in that standpoint. But, we do a lot of cruising in our family. And I know you've done some cruises too, because I was looking on your social media and I know you guys went to Alaska, which is just one of our favorite things. And you have to take a lot of luggage on a cruise. So I always everybody's like, oh, just take an Uber, just take a taxi. I'm like, no. I will spend a little extra money to call a service to have a little bit nicer car, but also one that I feel comfortable with. I know what's going to happen. I'm a planner. I want everything to go exactly the way I had it planned. I know it never does, as we learned in the racing world, but I got to control everything I can. And I can't do that with, a random Uber or anything like that, or even a taxi for that matter.
No, but like you said, they serve the purpose. I mean, when you walk out of the building and you want to go someplace quick and, you don't, because, and again, I did a presentation years ago when Uber first came out and, everybody's, oh man, we got to fight this. I said, look, that game's already, that ship's sailed. We've already lost because number one, we don't have any, it's a better mousetrap. They just, it's easier. Look, you gotta call me or my team or somebody else's team, find out if they're open, are they available, how much it costs. And with 3 buttons, you got to rock. So that's not going to go away. It's a better mousetrap, and we love it. So again, the only thing that I would encourage people to do is just to go, hey, look, we need to hold them to some sort of standards so that we know that when we're getting in an Uber, that the person that's behind the wheel is who they say they are, and they're qualified, and they don't have some of the baggage that you wouldn't want to ride with somebody with. That's
exactly.
And the same thing with the vehicles. To my understanding, and I don't know this because I don't take the Ubers, but they don't have any of the inspections that we have to go through every 6 months.
Right. It's just whatever the state inspection is in that state. I live in South Carolina, and we didn't even have state inspections. You can put any old piece of crap on the road as long as it has headlights and turn signals. One other thing that I want to ask is there like certain etiquette that passengers need to follow for being in one of these vehicles? Because I see a lot of, when you get bachelorette parties and stuff like that, things can get a little bit crazy. But, for me, a limo is a luxury thing, and I immediately am on my best behavior when, I get into one, but, maybe that's just me. So is there any etiquette that we need to be aware of?
Usually when we pick everybody up, everybody's, sober and everybody's kissing the wife and the husbands goodbye. And then 4 hours later, all the monsters come out. So, and yeah, it's, and some groups are better than, what we've learned is if you have a 6-passenger limo, you've got one donkey, we'll call it. You have a 10-passenger, you got 2. You got a 14, you got 3. And then if you get a 20, you've got 4 donkeys.
So there's actually a mathematical formula for the number of jackasses that are going to be in your cars.
Right. Well, ideally, we train our folks to always go back to the person renting the car, right? Because, everybody sometimes get a little tuned up and they all start shouting, I want to go here, I want to go there, I want to go. Leanne, where do you want to go? And that way.
Right. The person paying the bill. And keep in mind, if you're the person paying the bill, you're the person paying the bill if one of your crazy guests does something damaging, shall we say.
Yeah, we've had it. We've had some even A-list celebrities tearing up stuff. And we could write books, probably, but as far as etiquette, we want you to have a great time within reason. Keep your hands in I don't build anything, or most people in our industry don't build any moonroofs anymore. People are like, oh my God, you don't have a moonroof?
Yeah.
No,
No moonroof surfing anymore. Dang.
not, they stand out of them, they break or they leak. So no more moonroofs. Oh, and we used to have to train guys and gals. I'm like, look, if you're in the city and all of a sudden the people that are on, the sidewalks are waving, but they're looking above you, somebody's in the back out of the moonroof. And they're like, what? And so I'm like, they close the moonroof. And so anyway, and I never did ever figure out the difference between a sunroof and a moonroof. Maybe you know, I don't know.
Oh, the way I define it, and I think this is how the industry defines it, is a sunroof was where you have it's the metal roof. So when you close it, you have just metal painted roof. So you can't see through it. A moonroof it's glass. So when it's closed, you can see through it. So you can see the moon at night, and then you can open it and get the sun coming in during the day. So most things now are true moonroofs.
Gotcha. Yeah. But now, as I mentioned earlier, with a lot of what we do, there's a lot of anxiety because we're only part of the event. Right? I mean, so what they're doing is super important. As it said, whether you're going to a concert, whether you're getting married, everything is pressure packed. So I would always recommend to make your itinerary longer than, not just because it's more money, but because it takes the pressure off. So the more that you take the pressure off yourself, the better experience you can have. I mean, if you've got a concert that's an hour away at 7:00 and you want to leave at 6 on a Friday in the rain, well, chances are you might miss part of the concert. So yeah, the etiquette is, keep your hands and feet inside the train. Don't
roller coaster rules.
Don't tell people on the, we've had this happen. I don't know how many times somebody's in the city and they're yelling profanities at some, a group that's on the sidewalk, right? Well, what they don't understand is that there's a traffic light then just a block away, and that group catches up. And so,
right,
where that group tears up the limo from the outside because of something that happened on the inside, where people are, mouthing off or what have you. As far as, I don't know about other companies around the country, we don't allow smoking. We don't want anything to do with illegal drugs. We don't want anything to do with things that are more, with just not our game.
You can have your beverages back there, but that's it.
Yeah, as long as you're 21.
Right.
If you're not 21, don't call us.
Well, before we wrap up, I have one last question. So who is, and if you're allowed to even say, but who is the most famous person you have ever had in one of your vehicles?
I don't know, maybe George Clooney.
Wow. Yeah, I wouldn't mind riding in a limo with George Clooney and talking to him.
So he was doing a movie called Syriana.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to get a lot of movies shot in the Maryland area back in the 90s. So, I will say pleasantly, great guy, wonderful,
cool.
Gets in the car, wants to know everything about all the chauffeurs. Wasn't me. He was telling us about his Italian villa that he was remodeling himself with his own hands.
Cool.
And, just a really engaging. Everything you would think that he would be, he really was.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here, Jonce. I have learned a lot. And everyone, thank you for joining us here on The Straight Shift. There will not be a show next week because of the holidays. So I want everyone to have a Merry Yule, Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy Boxing Day, Joyous Kwanzaa, and a Happy New Year. We will be back on New Year's Day with my predictions for what the heck is going to happen in the automotive industry in 2025. And will it be a good time to buy cars? Happy holidays and be safe. I'm out of here.
The Straight Shift podcast is copyright Leanne Shattuck, The Car Chick, 2017. All views expressed by guest and or co-hosts are those of the guest and or co-hosts, and not necessarily those of Leanne Shattuck or The Car Chick.